Welcome to an all-new Restoration Today podcast
brought to you by NextGear Solutions, now part of CoreLogic. NextGear is the preferred technology provider for the restoration industry and serves managed repair networks, franchisors, contractors, and insurance carriers looking to run a consistently smarter business. Manage your jobs from anywhere and communicate with customers in real time. Visit nextgearsolutions.com to learn how NextGear can help you transform your restoration business today. Hey, thanks for checking out another episode of the Restoration Today podcast. Today, I am joined by a fellow podcaster, and it is so fun to turn the tables on other podcasters, and I get to be the one to ask the questions and make him do the talking. I love that. I was already a guest on his show in 2021, which I really appreciate. It is Rico Garcia. He does the Restoration Domination podcast, which is all about business growth hacks. His whole motto is hustle, hack, dominate. And Rico has a great background in the restoration industry, a huge passion for the industry and what happens here, marketing, all those things. So we're going to dive into a ton of topics. But Rico, I'm just going to toss it over to you first and have you introduce yourself and share your background in the industry.
Awesome. Thank you. First and foremost, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's really, really fun. It's kind of interesting being on this side because usually I'm the one who's asking the questions. But yeah, thank you again so much for having me on the show. So a little bit about me. I obviously am in the restoration industry. I own a water mitigation, mold remediation company here in South Florida. We also have an office in the Georgia area. We've been in the business for around 5 years or so. But really, like, our passion is all about marketing, right? Like, how do we get our services and our products in front of the end consumer? So for us, like, when we got into the business, we actually came from a marketing background and knew very, very little about the actual restoration business. I mean, I think, for being like fully open and candid, like, we're still learning every single day about the little nuances of the restoration business. But knowing that, we really had to go ahead and get off the blocks strong. And the only way that we knew how to do that was by going straight to the end consumer and with a good marketing message. And that's kind of been my whole messaging. Even with our podcast, obviously, we talk a lot about mindset, as you know, we talk a lot about books and, everything that's going to help us grow as an entrepreneur inside of the restoration business. But it's always around how can you get in front of more people that you could actually service. So that's kind of been our thing.
So how did you get to the point where you decided, hey, I want to start a podcast? Where'd that come from?
So that's a funny story. So the Restoration Domination logo, and I kid you not, I have this logo made, I want to say 4 years ago. Okay. So this is how long it's been going, right? So, because when I first got into the business, I think, like most people that enter the business, I was out there. I was trying to scour the internet. I was looking for podcasts. I was looking on YouTube. And I think that anybody who's ever tried to do that realizes this is a phenomenal industry. We've got amazing people, great talent, great entrepreneurs, people that really, really know how to scale businesses. However, the content side is probably the thinnest out of any industry out there. So, and no offense to, any of the, the giants of our industry that have been around for a very long time, but the little information that was out there was just a lot of war stories, right? It was a lot of war stories about, how great they were in the business. And that's great. But for, a quote unquote small guy breaking into the industry, I was like, guys, I need meat now. Like, I need something actionable now. What can I learn from this 30, 40, 50-minute conversation that I could actually implement in my business? So very, very early on, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and be that voice, or so I'd like to be that voice. And I decided to get the logo and all that stuff. And then funny enough, I actually did 3 interviews that nobody has ever seen. Those are the first 3 interviews that I ever did. And they just kind of sat on my hard drive. And and then a couple of years passed by and I dusted off and I'm like, okay, you know what? We are officially ready. And we launched. And you know what? I couldn't have planned it any better, any other way. I mean, we've had amazing guests on the podcast, sharing tons and tons of information. And it's just been a total blast.
So talk about some of the guests that you've had so far. Like, I don't want you to call out favorites, I guess, but do you have any that are like, that was a really fun episode, or some of the topics that you've covered so far?
Oh man, I mean, so many great people. I mean, obviously, you've been on my podcast here. Yeah, got to mention you first. Rachel Stewart was an amazing podcast as well. Edon Spicer was actually my very first podcast, which to me, so funny story about that. When I first got into the business, one of the first stories that I ever heard about was actually about Edon Spicer's story. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. If this guy could do it, I can do it. And finally, when I dusted off the logo and all this stuff for the Restoration Domination, I'm like, look, I'm always about go big or go home. So just go for the big names that you want. And you'd be surprised at the people that just say, okay, cool. So Edon didn't know me from a hole in the wall. And I get a response. He's like, yeah, sure, let's do it. And I'm like, really? Okay, cool. And then
that's awesome.
Yeah. And, so he is one of the guys, and again, probably he's one of the interviews that was most impactful for me for several reasons outside of the interview in and of itself. But he's one of the very few people that I've walked away from after the interview, after the conversation. And as a matter of fact, I walked into the next room and I told my wife, and I was like, I get it. I understand. And she's like, what do you mean? I was like, I totally get why he's gotten as far as he's gotten. And she's like, what are you talking about? I was like, this guy's real and genuine. I probably have off camera stuff, audio clips of him and I that are totally behind the scenes. He probably spent another 30 to 40 minutes off interview, just talking business, talking mindset, but and actually being a servant. So that's a quality that you're either born with that or you're not. And he's one of those individuals that really, really has it in the industry. I'm sure there's tons of great, amazing individuals that are like that, but he's probably one of the most impactful. Obviously, we've had, some of the greats in our industry, like Chuck Violand and, a lot of roofers as well. So I'm of the philosophy that we can't just have the blinders on in our industry. And I think that our industry has had the blinders on for entirely too long, right? But if a roofer has a really successful business, I think it's worth having a conversation with that entrepreneur and be like, hey, talk to me about your hiring process. Talk to me about your sales process. Talk to me about your money management process. Talk to me about these things and what can I learn from your industry? Also had an amazing interview with Tommy Mello. Tommy Mello is from A1 Garage. Okay. This guy's running an $85 million a year business, doing garage, door servicing. When you think about that, right? You're like, whoa,
that's a lot of garage doors.
That's a whole lot of garage doors. So when you have a conversation with him, and this is, the kind of flavor that I try to bring into our podcast, because I don't want to talk about air movers. And I think you and I spoke about this. I don't want to talk about air movers and DHUs and, about how we can dry a structure out in 3 days as opposed to 5. All of these things are great, but really what's going to move the needle is having, being a fly on the wall when you're having a great conversation and saying, what can I genuinely pull away from this conversation? And, when you have people like, for example, Tommy Mello, and he's got an $85 million a year company, with tons of employees and all of these different moving parts, you can learn a whole lot from individuals like that. So that's kind of some of the flavor that I bring into the overall industry.
I love it. Okay. I want to go back to Edon really quick. And just for people who are listening, it's Edon Spicer. He is the founder of 911 Restoration. You can follow him on LinkedIn. He shares amazing stuff. He also has written a book, Get Out of the Truck. He does have amazing content and amazing wisdom and a great story. So go back and listen to Rico's podcast with him. Check him out on LinkedIn. Look at his book, all of that. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So, what are some of the big trends that you see happening in the industry right now? I know that there's some obvious ones like hiring and M&A and inflation and, there's stuff like that. What are some other big trends you kind of see emerging as a business owner that you think need to be talked about?
So there's been a lot of mergers and acquisitions lately. That's kind of the big, buzzword in the industry. And I think that this is a really, really good opportunity. Some people think that it's bad for the industry. I personally believe that this is a great opportunity for the smaller entrepreneur, right? Reason for that is you are much more nimble. I'm of the opinion, and this is, again, maybe I'm alone in my island when I'm talking about this, but I'm of the opinion that if 3 or 4 of your competitors in your marketplace, if they all merge together under one management team, I'm all for that. I would take the odd man out all day because now I am quicker to make decisions. I am much more nimble and we can run leaner and go to market that much faster with new and innovative ideas. So I think a lot of people are focusing on the wrong thing. And again, mind you, I'm not saying to turn the blind eye to some of the real issues in the industry, right? Like, yes, there is a labor shortage. Yes, there are, issues that everybody's battling. But I think that if you're constantly mentioning the problem, you're only going to see the problem. And I think that the narrative needs to change a little bit to say, okay, well, there is a labor shortage, but why is it that we're not acquiring top level talent? Why is it that we're not, attracting new and fresh blood? Because again, it's not the 40, 50, 60-year-olds that make up our labor force. It's the younger cats that are making up our labor force. So what is it that you're doing to attract them? What packages do you have? What mentoring can you offer them? What, real, true, long-lasting career opportunities can you offer these individuals, right? And I also think that they're not marketing to that demographic. And I think that the industry needs to start looking at bringing in talent and attracting talent, looking at that as a marketing arm of their business. And a lot of the reasons why there's labor shortages, and again, there's several reasons why, but a lot of the reasons why restoration companies are not attracting this good talent that's actually looking for the opportunity that restoration has to offer is the messaging isn't there for them, right? They're only running an ad when they need a brand new tech. Once 2 techs have already left, like, you're already doing damage control. Yep. So this needs to be a 24/7 campaign. So that's what I believe. I also believe, based on the conversations that I've had with a lot of amazing entrepreneurs, the people that are really winning in the game are bringing a lot of this stuff in-house. When I say stuff, I'm referring to marketing. They're bringing the marketing in-house. And I know that there's, a couple of SEO companies and PPC companies out there that are quote unquote restoration specialists. And nothing against them. They provide great services. There's great companies out there, but I challenge the entrepreneur to look at it from a different lens. The most important skill that you have in this business is to get your phone ringing with a customer who needs your service. That's the most important skill. Everything else you can figure out. Labor shortages, no worry. Worry about closing a big deal first, and then call your competitor down the street and be like, hey, I need like 10 of your guys. Bring them over here. Let's go ahead and split this deal. To me, that's how you can go ahead and overcome the labor shortage. But the first thing is you really need to get the phone ringing. So the companies that are moving really, really fast are the ones that are bringing those marketing teams in-house.
Okay, so if you're talking about marketing to people, younger generation, future generation of restorers, bringing new people into the fold, what are some of the techniques that you think that restoration companies could be doing to bring future generations into the fold?
I mean, look, you got to go social, go social and go deep on social. Like, for example, most restoration companies have one Instagram account. Let's just use Instagram as an example. Okay, cool. Well, really what you should be doing is you should be developing these assets, right? You should be looking at each one of your team members as an individual asset. So what do I mean by that? So let's say, for example, that tomorrow I decide to hire Susie Q, right? And Susie Q is my, one of the members of my marketing team. Okay. Well, then what I do is then now I will develop a, handle Restoration Domination, let's just use it, or Ecotech Pro at Susie Q, right? _ Susie Q. Well, now that's her asset. And so as part of her team building, right, what is she going to be doing? She's going to be growing her following, right? She's going to be doing check-ins. She's going to be doing social media stories and stuff like that. So now what's going to happen is when she first opens up this account, which, by the way, you as the owner, you open up this account because it now becomes your company asset. You set this account up for her, but then she's getting all the followers. Or who are going to be her first followers? It's going to be friends and family.
Uh-huh.
Oh, wait, Rico, what? Yeah. Friends and family is going to be the first one that she reaches out to, that she's requesting to go ahead and follow her journey. So now if you, as a mentor in the business, as, a good boss, a good leader, now if she starts to demonstrate growth in her career, well, guess what? Her friends and family are going to look at how happy Susie Q is, right? She's constantly checking in and, sharing stories with the colleagues at work. And eventually her close circle of people are probably going to want to participate in your organization and make sure that they grow as well. So, and I think that you go ahead and build those assets over time. So let's say, for example, 2 years down the road, well, now you have 10, Susie Qs that are working for you, right? Each one of them have a social media account. there's also like a little psychological trick there that's happening as well. So for example, if all of a sudden now you built your social media account, which by the way is my company asset, you built that up to 15,000 loyal followers, it's very difficult to just walk away from that, because now you know that you have a constant well that is producing money for you, right? So, but in the event that Suzy Q decides to, grow and, find another opportunity, whatever it is that, she wants to follow, well, you still retain that company asset. So that's one of the methods that can be used. I mean, there's several, but we'd literally take 10 hours to talk about this, but that's one of the things right now that I think a lot of companies should be implementing. And I think that would cover a lot of ground in the sense of recruiting and also revenue.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So a little bit of devil's advocate on that, because I'm sure that you're doing this in your company. How do you handle social media policies then, and making sure they're not sharing that? Because I know that owners are going to listen to this and be like, I don't want them sharing a picture of the crime.
I think you need to. Yeah. So,
you know where I'm going. So go ahead.
Yeah. So I think that then you need to go ahead and then really question yourself as to who you're hiring for what position. If you don't trust that employee enough with the phone, why do you trust them enough in your company? Period. Okay. So, I mean, it's a tough, it's one of these tough things, right? And I get it. And I totally get it. Because sometimes it's great, the person is a perfect tech, but that tech may not necessarily need to, have a social media account for your organization. Maybe your project managers do. Mm-hmm. Right. So maybe you can make that something that isn't accessible to everybody in the organization. Because, for example, the likelihood of your warehouse manager needing, a social media, it's just not conducive for business. But I do think that your marketing team, if they're out there already shaking hands and kissing babies, if they're, representing your company name and you don't trust them with their phone, then really you just need to go back to your overall hiring, SOPs and start making some tweaks on that side. That's what I would say. And nothing is perfect. And at the end of the day, look, people make mistakes, people get disgruntled. We're not perfect human beings. Then you know what? You just hit the delete button and, you take whatever action is necessary from there. But that's why you own the asset, because if in the event that you do have a disgruntled employee or whatever the case may be, then if you don't own that asset, then you're really in bad shape. But if you set up the asset yourself, you don't even give them username and password. One app that I use a lot is called LastPass, and this manages all of your passwords, and you can share password and login credentials, but to an end user, but they won't see the actual password. So, that's a little trick that you can use there too.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So what about retention? Let's talk about retaining employees. What do you think it takes today when somebody could go over to Lowe's or Home Depot and make $15+ an hour and not be working overnight and crawling in sewage and spiders and all the things? How are we retaining employees?
Man, that's so tough. I mean, and again, look, everybody needs to stay in the lane. I'm definitely not the world's foremost expert on how to retain employees. What I will say, though, is I think you need to have a clear understanding of who your competitors are. Mm-hmm. So what do I mean by competitors? Well, you're competing against the internet. So you're competing against e-com. You're competing against FBA. You're competing against now NFTs. You're competing against all of these digital assets, right? Huge money-making opportunities, huge. And, a lot of people look at this and they're like, oh man, you can't make money on the internet. No, there's tons of money being made every single day just buying, JPEG NFTs, right? So that's what you're battling. Mm-hmm. So when you're hiring, there's really got to be a mission behind the hire. I think at its core, and this is where it becomes really difficult, because now you get into a pricing situation, right? You have to increase your margins in order to make sure that your people are well taken care of. There needs to be a mission for your people. And I think if you can go ahead and find whatever that mission is for you, your organization, and your people, that's where I think retention will come in. I think if you care a little bit more about Suzy Q and why she actually needs this job, and is it because, she's taking care of her grandmother? Is it because she wants to go through college? And then if you can assist in those things, you do that over an extended period of time, let's say, over, 100 versions of Susie Q. Some of them are not going to be grateful, and some of them are going to walk away. Others are going to outgrow your organization, and they're, and you need to send them on their way. But there's going to be a good percentage of those people that I think if you treat them with love, respect, and dignity, and you have the financial wherewithal to actually pay them what they're worth, then I think that a certain percentage of people, the right people, will stick with you.
Yep. Okay. That makes sense. All right. So going back to some of the guests that you've had, are there any others? Like, what are some of the biggest nuggets of wisdom you've walked away with? We talked about Edon and a few others, but yeah, what are some of the other nuggets that you've walked away with? How many episodes do you have now? We're recording this in January of 2022. How many do you think you have?
Yeah. So I think we are 27, 28 episodes in live. And then we've got probably, I don't know, like 10 or 11 in the queue. That are already like ready to rock and roll. So yeah, we have, I'm actually thinking about potential. So we do a once a week episode, and we're thinking about possibly in the middle of the year doing it to twice a week, just because we have that much content that. Yeah. But yeah, it's so the interviewing part is the easy part for the most part. Right. But then you have like all of the editing, and I don't know if you've seen, of course you've seen, because we've tagged you. So we go crazy. So, Shelly, big shout out to Shelly, my wife, like Restoration Domination wouldn't even happen if it wasn't for her. She goes in, and I don't know how she even allows me to talk in the house. Cause then I walk in sometimes and I hear my voice, and it's her like pulling out little snippets and stuff like that. So so there's a lot of back end stuff that goes into it. And then plus the website itself with all of the book recommendations that our guests make, all of their social media. So we do a lot to try to showcase our guest, because that's really what's important, is showcasing their voice. And yeah, it's just very, very time consuming.
Yes, you guys are like my podcast goals with your teasers and your graphics and your rundown. I'm like, man, how did they? I need a Shelly in my life. She does all the things. So
you're gonna make her day too when she sees this. She's like, I need a Shelly in my life. It's gonna be on loop now.
Yes, she does fantastic. I love it, and I'm jealous. I really am. It's good. I was just talking to my husband today actually about my podcast. I'm like, can we start cutting teasers? I need something else. I'm feeling left out of these people who are like, they have all the things. And anyway, do you have any guests coming up that you're really looking forward to? Anybody you want to tease coming up?
Oh man, so I'm really excited for so actually, because I know that this probably is the one that I'm going to talk about right now is probably going to be released before this show gets released. So I just did an interview with Tom McCarthy. And this individual, he's an author. He's considered one of the world's best high stakes coaches. He's worked with Tony Robbins in sales and marketing in the early years of Tony Robbins. So he was a phenomenal interview that I was really excited to get on the show. Again, he's just one of those people that I'm like, hey, by the way, you want to jump on the show? And he's like, okay, cool. So he was an amazing interview. Again, he's not related to restoration, but he's all about what I think restoration needs to be about, which is the mindset, the growth of the entrepreneur, the ability to problem solve. And the biggest takeaways, which I actually did I think right at the beginning of the year, towards the end of the year, I actually did my 7 biggest takeaways of all of my guests. There was very specific silos of information, right? And on every single conversation, mindset was the number one common denominator with all of these amazing entrepreneurs, not only from the restoration industry, but from abroad. It didn't matter. And then, of course, there was the sales and marketing and, the hiring. Like, it always boiled down to a couple of these very specific areas. And for me, I think the biggest takeaway is go back to the basics. There's nothing that is going to change your business that you haven't already heard of in the past. What I think the big takeaway is actually start believing that your mindset matters. Actually start believing that you don't have as many problems as you think you have. And once you change that paradigm, now you start looking for solutions. Most of us get so bogged down because we're so close to our issues that all we see is the problem like right in our face. But if we concentrate off of that and look a little bit further down the road and we start looking at for solutions, we're going to find a lot more of them. And those are my biggest takeaways from some of these great individuals that we've interviewed.
Oh, I like that. That was good. Yes, it is so true that we see this instead of that's a really good
one
point.
of the examples that I'm always talking about, right? Like, I'm sure you've had a girlfriend, right? A girlfriend who's been in a bad relationship or a relationship that you were like questionable, right? And she's like madly in love. She's like, oh my God, isn't this guy darling? And you're like, honey, yeah, but look at all these red flags, right? No. And she just can't see it. But now that could potentially happen to you. Like if the roles were reversed, it's the same conversation. And you're like, no, but I don't see it. It's when you have a non-emotional response to what's actually happening and you can be objective and say, okay, this is what the problem is. Now we know what that is. That problem isn't going to change. Now let me go ahead and change my focus and try to find solutions. You're going to end up finding a little bit more.
So I'm betting that there are some owners listening to this. They're like, man, Rico owns a company in 2 states. And now he has this podcast. He's getting to do what he loves. Like he's getting to own his company and he's getting time to do something that he loves as maybe like a pet project here. So how do you do it? How did you set up your life, your company, whatever, to be able to pursue doing podcasting, which was, a goal for you while still having companies that are running?
So everything for me is based on lifestyle, and just what I want to do and when I want to do it. So I'm very much ADD in the sense of I like doing things and then achieving them and be like, okay, cool, this was fun. And then once I achieve like a goal, then I'm like, okay, what's next? And then I kind of like have to pivot. The only thing that's really genuinely always been like a constant for me, like true, genuine passion is having these conversations with amazing entrepreneurs, problem solving, issues with, individuals' business, kind of getting into the weeds with the issues that they're going through and then being able to unpack it and then seeing those aha moments. Like money is amazing. Like we all need it. The world goes, will stop spinning if we don't have any money. But once you have some of it, like really, it just becomes, it just becomes regular, right? It's like, okay, this month I'm going to make this. It's great. Okay. But because you're already satiated. So for me, the passion is really being able to have these conversations with entrepreneurs. One of the things that we do, which I don't know if you know, but based on the fact that I'm constantly preaching about the importance of marketing. So I have a course as well for marketing, mainly on Google Ads for contractors and entrepreneurs, where I show, small companies, mid-sized companies, how they can go ahead and bring their marketing in-house, how they can go ahead and get paying clients on demand, how they can, shorten their overall learning curve, and not spend as much money testing, like all of these like ninja tricks, right? That once I go ahead and show people those kind of scenarios and I see that aha, like that's the big takeaway for me.
What do you tell companies that are, especially smaller companies that are just starting out and they're like, marketing is so complicated, especially digital marketing and SEO and all the things, like, I don't even know where to start. What do you tell them?
Don't do SEO. Stop with the SEO. So again, this is not a one size fits all. Let me just give you a one scenario. If you're an organization and you're just starting, you don't have a penny to your name, you're not doing any TPA work, you need to go straight to consumer. So for example, our organization, right, our restoration company, we do no program work. Doesn't mean that we don't do insurance work. We just don't do any program work, right? We'll go straight to the consumer, present them with a marketing message because they need service. And look, here's a secret for everybody. Pick up the phone. That's a secret. If you can pick up the phone, like you're already head and shoulders above the rest of your competition, right? So that's like issue number one, pick up the phone. But really when it comes down to marketing and you are just starting your organization, or maybe you're like sub 1 mil, let's say, the path of least resistance, I believe, is going pay-per-click advertising. Now, some people will disagree with that. My argument is pay-per-click is the way to go in the beginning, especially for our business, for water damage, for mold remediation, for all of these restoration services that we offer. Pay-per-click is the place to be because number one, you could start your company today, and by tomorrow, your phone can be ringing. You can start your company today, identify the biggest players in the market who are spending $100,000, $200,000 a month on PPC, and you can go ahead and reverse engineer their campaign over a weekend. And now they've done all the heavy lifting for you. And now you just go ahead and clone or mimic what it is that they're doing in your market area. So that for me is very, very big. And then once you start getting some cash flow, then you start investing in your organic, which is your SEO, portion of the marketing. SEO is going to be the absolute best ROI long term. The problem is most organizations are like, oh, well, I need a website. So then they start getting pitched on LinkedIn from all of these SEO companies. The problem is that the business owner doesn't understand SEO. So they don't understand how it works. They don't understand the metrics. And all they know is that they're spending, $1,200 a month to $5,000 a month, and they don't see an ROI on it. So now here's the thing. They're spending money. And then number two, they don't understand it. So, and they're not getting the phone to ring. So because they don't understand it and it's costing them money, most people just stop the SEO campaign and then it never goes anywhere. So this is kind of goes back to why it is that I say, number one, if you're talking about drying out a room, you could have an intelligent conversation with any restoration company for the most part, right? Because they understand the metrics, they understand, the calculations, the formula. Well, why would you not take the time? Why would you go to another IICRC course and not take the time to figure out the bare bones minimum of how marketing genuinely works? So that way, either A, you can take it in-house, or when you do sub it out to an organization and they start presenting you with data, now you understand how to interpret that data.
Okay. So this can be marketing aside. You can answer it with anything you want, but what is the number one piece of advice you would give somebody just stepping into the restoration industry who's thinking about starting their own company? What's the number one piece of advice you would give them?
Ooh. Have they been in the business before or haven't been in the business?
Question. Okay, let's talk about somebody who's worked in construction or restoration before and they're ready to start their own company. Let's start there.
Network with good quality people in your industry, right in your backyard. Most people are going to be very, very friendly. Most people, depending on the size of organizations that you're approaching, they could probably use your help if you have certain skill sets. And that would be like my go-to is just go ahead, get out there, shake hands, kiss babies, and try to learn as much as you possibly can from people that have already been in the industry who are going to be able to shortcut some of the most important aspects of your business, which would be, how to go ahead and get paid quickly from insurance, right? How to go ahead and properly build out your estimates. What kind of macros should you already have, when you're building exactly like all of these small little things that in the beginning, for me, at least, like these were all like, I was like, what is this stuff? Like, so for me, I had to learn all of that stuff like the hard way. Lucky for me, what I lacked in knowledge of the industry, I made up for in sheer volume. So for me, it was kind of like, whatever, it worked. And that's basically the advice that I would give to brand new people that are getting into the business. And aside from that is get familiar with marketing, because if you can't get familiar with marketing, it's just you're going to end up bleeding out money to other organizations that really, don't care about your business as much as you do. So that should be part of everybody's business. The other thing that I would add as a little tidbit for all of the restoration companies out there, here's something funny. So I was on a conference call with an individual. Let's just call it an individual. And I asked him, we were talking about money and how restoration companies should look at opportunities. I'm like, let me ask you a question. Knowing that I own a restoration company, and that's what you knew from me, and I asked you, what business am I in? What would you say? And he's like, well, of course, restoration. I'm like, you're absolutely wrong. It's the money business. Restoration companies need to start looking, especially the newer, smaller, more nimbler companies. They need to realize that they're not in the dry out business. They're not in the mold business. They are in the money business. Example would be, if you have a skill set to go ahead and generate leads for your plumbers, your public adjusters, and all of this stuff, that's a money transaction. Emphasize on that instead of putting down machines. And then in turn, they're going to go ahead and flood your company with business. When you're going out to a hoarding project or a fire project or, a super bad flood, look at the piece of property and look at what the dynamic is in that property. Is this a distressed homeowner? Are they looking to get out of the property? Is this a wholesaling opportunity for you? Can you provide your services and then above and beyond that still make $20,000-$30,000 on a wholesale deal? You'd be surprised at how many money-making opportunities there are within the restoration business that nobody's talking about. And maybe for huge organizations, you can't really do that unless you have a very specific team dedicated to these kind of things. But again, the power of being smaller and being nimble is the fact that you can go ahead and look at your business from a different lens and be like, okay, how is it that I can offer the most amount of service to everybody that I touch through my organization and everybody gets a piece of the pie? If you can figure that out, I think you'll be just fine. Love it. All of it. Okay. Where can people find you, Rico? That's good. So restorationdomination.com for sure. The podcast, you could obviously find it anywhere that you listen to your podcast. That's probably going to be the best. I'm on LinkedIn as well. Rico Garcia Jr. That's RicoGarcia. And that's pretty much my handle everywhere. So if you find a Rico Garcia Jr., it's probably me. Perfect. I love it. Okay. For anybody who's listening, be sure to check out Rico's podcast. He has a lot of great ones out there, a lot of great content, and you can check out a lot of his teasers. I mean, you're going to find a lot of great quotes and stuff on his social media channels or whatever. And that helps you kind of narrow down who you want to listen to, the topics they're going to cover, all of that. They do a great job of breaking it down. His wife, Shelly, really is a rock star and sweet as can be. So, all right, Rico, thank you so much for being a guest. Thank you for having me as a guest on yours a while back. I appreciate that. And hopefully we can catch up again soon. Awesome. Let's do it. For more Restoration Today, visit our website, cnrmagazine.com, or find us wherever you get your favorite podcasts.